Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the best political show on YouTube. Yes, it is the number one political show because we've got Mr. Brady below us, the only Irish bank manager who refused Bertie Ahern and Charlie Hottie an overdraft, and they're still mad with him to this day. I mean, Bertie Ahern will not talk to Mr. Brady because he wouldn't offer him a €50 overdraft. Philip, I don't know what you're thinking. I mean, I can understand Charlie Hottie because he was buying shirts and champagne. But Bertie Ahern, the future president of Ireland, what were you thinking? But we will get into that later. He's going to kill me. He really will kill me at some point in my life. We're joined also by United States royalty. It's like the president, it's like POTUS himself has come to our little political channel to bring his wisdom of American views. But listen, guys, I have to pop off for 2 minutes. I'm going to leave you in the capable hands of Mr. Brady to introduce Steve and talk to you what we're going to talk about today. It's a bit about the Pope, a little bit about a border poll as well. But Philip, I'll be back in 2 minutes and I'll let you carry on. Sorry, guys. I need to go to Lou. Apologies. Take it away.
There you go. The beauty of live TV, huh? Anyway, Steve's good.
Just don't work with animals. Don't work with animals or children. That's all they say.
I thought you said you had to use the loo.
Or Dermatron.
Yeah, it's don't work with animals, children, or Dermot. But anyway, Philip, take over.
Anyway, it's the first program we've done with Steve, so it's good to meet you, Steve.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Yeah. Today, I suppose the biggest event worldwide today was the actual funeral of the Pope, who was Pope Francis, who was buried, broke with tradition and didn't get buried with other popes in the vaults of St. Peter's, which is quite unusual. He has been buried in another church, St. Maria Maggiore, I think it is, downtown in Rome. So he broke with tradition there. But then again, this Pope has been a man that has broke with tradition since he was elected. We were just talking before we came on there about the fact that the Pope is entitled to take a salary every year. And this Pope took a vow of poverty when he became ordained, and means all his money was given to charity or not taken at all. And in fact, when he died, when every Pope died, his assets have to be declared of what he had. This Pope died with a sum total of €100 to his name. So that was the sort of guy he was. Excellent. You know, he was like I don't know what sort of let's say what sort of reaction. What was the reaction in America, Steve, to the Pope dying?
That's a good question. I would probably assume it would be the same reaction that I had, acknowledging that a Pope passed away, but understanding the climate here in the United States, I would probably assume those that are Catholic took it hard. I would assume, but outside of that, probably not much coverage. Yeah. I would assume, just because religion has no place in a lot of lives of certain Americans, so they probably just took it with a blink of an eye. It's unfortunate too.
Yeah, it's been kind of dominating. It's been dominating the news cycles here. Like every TV station that sent their reporters out to Rome, and in fact, a lot of people from Ireland actually got on a plane, went out to Rome to view the body, and came home again. Yeah. You know, it wouldn't have come cheap to a lot of people. So that shows you the reaction here. Obviously, Ireland being a very Catholic country, who the Pope visited 6 years ago, we would have a strong affinity with him. But what I thought was actually strange was, when a Pope is ordained, the first thing he'd normally do is go back to his own, not maybe the first thing, but he'd go back to his home country, to, I suppose, for the adulation, if you like, if nothing else. He did not ever go back to Argentina since he was ordained 12 years ago, because he disagreed strongly with the political system in Argentina and felt he may have been in danger if he'd gone back. So even though the Argentina people got the pride of place at the funeral today, he never actually went back to his country. So it's quite an unusual one.
That seems a little disappointing. Considering that that's fine. You can disagree with the political climate, but that being said, you're the Pope, though. You're the symbol. You're symbol of taking a vow of poverty is still, and it still serves as a big uplifter for people of poverty, especially in your home country.
It probably would have been a big thing for Argentinians for him to go home, but I think obviously he must have been warned that maybe him going back there might not have been safe for him.
Perhaps.
Maybe that's what
Perhaps.
it was. But another thing too, which I thought was interesting, just to compare the sizes of funerals compared to like 200,000, 250,000 people, they reckon, filed past the body since Wednesday night until last night. When John Paul II died in 2005, over 2 million people filed past. Now, that doesn't mean to say he was 8 times more popular than the present Pope, but it just shows you the Pope still is a huge draw and a huge influence on an awful lot of people worldwide.
Mm. It is. There was a lot of world leaders there today. Philip, Trump was there, and there is a picture, isn't there, of Trump meeting the Ukrainian president, which I think it is. Is that the one?
Oh, they met for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Apparently, whenever Zelensky went into it, was seen. Obviously, the TV screens all over the place to show the people outside. When Zelensky arrived in St. Peter's, there was a huge cheer come up for him.
Yeah,
which must be very heartening for him, you know. But the thing that's making the most news at the minute, and to be honest, it's totally irrelevant, but it just shows you the way things go. Every other political leader turned up in the black suit except one.
Yeah, you're a mate.
Guess who? No, I'm not going to criticize him for that, but he should have been told wear black. That's what you wear to a funeral, you know.
The picture that's shown there between him and Zelensky in the St. Peter's, they're face to face, very close, very poignant, isn't it? And one of the big things of the past of the Pope Francis was he wanted peace. He wanted peace in Ukraine. How big of a legacy would be, guys, that after his death, peace does come to Ukraine? How do you think that would be a legacy for the Pope as well? Because he was always talking about it. Steve, do you want to start on that one?
How great his legacy would be if the conflict in Ukraine came to an end? I think that would be remarkable. But the question really is, you know, is the word of the Pope as strong as it was 50 years ago, where his declaration of peace would actually fall on world leaders' ears, where that would actually carry some weight, right? So me personally, I think this really comes down to 3 men sitting in a room and negotiating an end to this war. Wouldn't you think?
Yeah. Philip, where are you on it? I mean, Pope Francis was very sort of vocal, wasn't he? Even in the last Easter Mass he did before he died, before he passed away, he was asking for peace in Ukraine. And then the day of his funeral, Donald Trump is meeting the Ukrainian president, saying there is a peace treaty soon to be signed. How much does Steve make a point where the Pope, any Pope, words are not as vital as they used to be? I mean, I've only seen 3 popes in my lifetime: Saint John Paul II, who is a saint now, Pope Benedict, now Pope Francis. You've seen a few popes, Philip. How has it changed from, say, Pope whoever to Pope Francis? And is Steve right that popes don't have this much of, world leaders don't listen to popes anymore, or do they still do?
I think if peace does come about because of meeting, I think today's meeting is purely coincidental. It happened in Rome at his funeral. That is probably going to be the main throwback. They can claim it's his influence. I don't think so. The only people that are going to influence the end of this war are Vladimir Putin, Zelensky, and Donald Trump.
100%.
And the way I would look at it the minute, the way the American treaty has been brought, I cannot, unless there's been a huge mind shift of opinion in the last 24 hours, they're not going to give up the Crimea. They're not going to give up land already won by Russia. So unless something's happened in the last few hours, I cannot see that peace treaty going ahead without more problems. And I honestly think Putin doesn't want peace. I really don't think he does. If you want to get peace, you don't go bombing Ukraine cities every single night of the week. you know. But if peace does come, happy days, it'd be brilliant if it did. But I think it's down to those three lads banging their heads together more than the Pope's influence. But there will obviously be a factor that will claim the Pope by talking about peace.
Yeah.
About at his funeral, there will be an element of his involvement, but it's mainly the other guys that are going to do it.
Right. Like I remember back in, and again, I guess I'm dating myself now, but I do remember a time back in the 80s and the 90s when not only was the Pope message always showed on national news here in the United States, but every single time he spoke, people listened. There was always something to be gained from the wise elder that understands conflict and that understands exactly the needs and the humanitarian needs of other people. And so world leaders used to seek advice from the Pope, and I just question whether or not that's even relevant these days, which is terrible considering the Pope. The Pope has always been that strong central figure in the world.
Yeah, I think politically they've been sidelined a wee bit by the power of present day politics and the power of social
without a doubt.
Social media as well, which was never there in the past, but is really influencing things at the minute, And listen, all we can do is hope that some people they do see sense of it. That is the most pointless war, as is the one in Gaza. As any war, what's it going to gain? Misery. That's all.
Well, the interesting thing was that, and I've spent time listening to people that understand this far better than I do. That there was American interest in the Ukraine because of energy, natural resources that lie underneath the soil of the Ukraine. Not to mention the want and need to control the oil distribution through Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 that fed Europe. And knowing how the American imperial empire works, they want to have their greedy little hands on every little aspect around the world. Where Russia comes into it Russia was like, fine, do what you got to do, but don't bring NATO anywhere near our borders. Yeah. Don't bring NATO anywhere near our borders, or we're going to have to react. And sure enough, and also Ukraine being in NATO was 100% a non-starter. And sure enough, as the decades passed, that UN contingent got closer and closer to their borders, and then right when Biden took office, and then you see dipshit vice president going out to the G7 summit publicly picking a fight with Russia by asking if Ukraine wanted to be in NATO, which makes absolutely no sense. And people wonder why Putin reacted the way that he did. Well, guess what? He's been saying it for 30 years now. Don't come anywhere near our borders, and just respect the process and the treaties that were already in place before a lot of these things came to fruition. So from a Russian standpoint, I understand. From a U.S. standpoint, I completely and I understand the U.S. motives. It's not about making sure Ukraine is an independent, flourishing nation. It's because the U.S. always likes to get in there and steal their natural resources, and when they leave, it's they lay waste to the country, and when they leave.
But the world order is changing. After World War II, things have been the same pretty much since World War II. The agreement was there. The big guys wouldn't swallow up the small guys. That's gone now. If Russia takes over Crimea and other parts of Ukraine, that other countries like Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, they can worry. They're going to be next. So, it's a worrying thing now that this peace treaty needs to be fair, equitable, and not totally unbalanced in favor of one side. And unfortunately, that's the way I think it's going. And I honestly can't see Ukraine accepting it unless there's been concessions made by Russia. Because up to now, they have made no concessions.
I was going to say, I think Putin actually has publicly said on multiple instances that the peace treaty that they had, and I think it was the Minsk treaty that they had in place, that Ukraine was told by the U.S. not to accept, that they would still accept that treaty that was already agreed to. And I think he said that at least a dozen times in the last 4 years now. So it's worth mentioning that as well too.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Philip, look, and Steve, look, we all know Donald Trump is a decisive figure, but I give him credit where credit's due. He's trying to bring peace to our country. and he's trying to get the best for his own country too out of it, which is
100%.
any world leader would do the same. An Taoiseach would do the same for Ireland. Macron would do the same for France. I'm sure Keir Starmer would do the same for the UK. So every world leader is going to want to get the best out for their own country. But where I see it different a little bit is when you look, the Pope, he ran Gaza every night.
That's right.
Every evening.
8 o'clock every night.
And now, if you look at Ukraine and Russia, that is a war should never have started. You look at what's happening in Gaza at the moment, and being an Irish country, we're very much pro-Palestine, where we think Palestine should be its own independent, vibrant country. You should be able to have Israel on one side and Palestine the other, live co and co together, and let to live happily, not happily ever after, but to live with peace with one another. It can happen. I think, personally, the Pope also wanted the end of that war too. How do you bring an end to a war that's been going on for centuries? And secondly, how does America, because America is involved in this one. I'm not saying this, Steve, but please, I'm going to start with you first. How does the president of the United States of America, the president of the free world, the biggest country who freedom is the right of every individual, and that's echoed in your, I think in your Constitution as well, in your George Washington said that way back when America became a United States of America. Do they have to put a lot of pressure on Israel to say, hang on a minute here, you need to go, Netanyahu, you need to leave office. Somebody has to come in and respect your neighbors, respect the Palestinian people, respect who next you, give them what they want. You can both live happily, give back the land you've took, keep what you've got, let the Palestinians have their land and let them flourish as a country. As an Irish person, and as an Irish person, and I'm not backwards coming forward to this, I'm very much pro-Palestine, always have been, always will be, because it's how we are, aren't we, Philip, in this country, as a country?
Well, we have recognized Palestine.
We've recognized, yeah. So where do you stand in it, Steve? I mean, does Donald Trump have the power here to end that war as well, and to say, look, stop what you're doing and get on and bang their heads together, basically?
Well, you have to understand from the premise that war in itself is good business for the United States, because one of their chief exports is military-grade weapons, which Israel buys a lot. So from that standpoint, it's hard to end wars knowing that you're going to lose a lot of that revenue coming in as far as the defense business is concerned, because as you know, the largest contractors with the federal governments are defense companies that produce these war materials. That being said, now this is my personal belief on this, and it's an understanding of Israel from an Israel perspective. And again, I'm half Jewish, so there is some personal some of it is a little personal. But that being said, I've never been to Israel. I don't identify as an Israeli. I identify as American, because that's my country of origin. But that being said, I can understand Israel's stance, because Palestine has never been a country. It never was a country. Even back in the day, Palestine was never a sovereign country. It was ruled by the Ottomans. It was ruled by the British Empire for a long time as well too. From that standpoint, they have never been a sovereign country. And so from the Israel standpoint, they look at it exactly the same way. They say, hey, listen, it's not that we don't see anything as value. It's the fact that how can you demand a sovereign nation when you were never a sovereign country to begin with? So from that standpoint, they essentially look at Palestinians as squatters on land that they had absolutely no right to claim that they had to begin with in the first place. From that standpoint, here's the thing, right? Would I be okay with a sovereign nation of Palestine? To an extent, as long as they root out terrorist organizations. So once Palestinians make a declaration that terrorist organizations will not control the upper echelons of their government. So ISIS and Hamas, that's a non-starter. It is an absolute non-starter. You cannot be a sovereign nation if you are being ruled by a extreme Islamic terrorist network. I'm sorry, it does not jive, because the reality is if Israel backs off, what's going to end up happening is the same thing we saw on October 7th of last year. You're going to see more of that, which means you're going to continue to have conflict, because these people want to see Israelis dead. So the question is how do you stop it? I don't know. I don't know if you can, but the one thing you can do is, again, just like Trump, Zelensky, and Putin, it's almost the same. It's almost the same situation where you get the Palestinian leaders that are absolutely have no ties to terrorist organizations. You get Netanyahu and you get Trump into a room and you figure it out. The reality is, again, it's a non-starter. If there are any terrorist, Islamic terrorists or radical Islamic terrorists that want to control power, it's a non-starter. It's an absolute non-starter. If they root out terrorists, I'm more able to listen to any type of peace deal where it involves a sovereign nation. But understand, from an Israeli and a U.S. standpoint, Palestine had never been a country before.
Yeah,
Yeah,
look, we've said on this channel more than once, haven't we, Philip? October the 7th should never have happened.
No,
we've said that. We've said that.
It did, unfortunately.
Yeah. Look, I'm very what's the word I'm looking for? I'm very No. I'm gonna want to pay you a compliment. It's very brave. Not brave's probably the wrong word, but
no, it's brave.
How well, what you just said was very what's the word I'm looking for, Philip, here?
Magnanimous, I think. No,
magnanimous, that's the word. It came across very much of a way that other people should be talking, other people should say. And I have to say, it's a balanced view. And it's a very balanced view. Look,
could I just get in there just for a second?
Yeah, Philip. Yeah.
Just one thing. I mean, I would be like, I've in my recent past, I've been to Auschwitz a couple of times, right? I've seen the horrors that were inflicted on the Jewish people during the war by Hitler. I've seen they've been a persecuted nation all the way down through history, really, right? And my probable disappointment was to see them inflicting the same thing on another people. Now, I know the Palestinian people are innocent in the main, but they're infiltrated with Hamas terrorists. And as Steve rightly says, until they're gone out of the system, there can never be a Palestine state.
No.
And the ideal situation is get rid of the terrorists, let the Palestine people live on their own in peace, neighborly with Israel. But unfortunately, I think as long as Benjamin Netanyahu is there, that's not going to happen under any circumstance. It seems to me he could be a bit of a warmonger here. He's not going to give up until every Hamas guy is dead. But that's impossible. That is impossible.
And I think the events of October 7th plays a huge role in that, because a lot of innocent Israelis were slaughtered at the hand of Hamas, and so now that dude seems like he's out for blood.
Yeah, it's not nice for an eye with him,
Yeah.
Every time there's a hit on a hospital, you'll hear, "Oh well, we heard intelligence told us Hamas had infiltrated the hospital." Easy to say that. How to prove it? It's innocent suffering.
I tell other Americans that that are hell bent to protest for a free Palestine, and I just ask them simply, where were you when we were doing that in Afghanistan? When we were chasing all throughout the Middle East, bombing innocent people in search of ISIS and trying to root out terrorists, terrorist cells across our campaigns, whether that be in Iraq, Afghanistan, the Sudan, Libya, Syria. the Horn of Africa, Yemen. It's like, dude, we have laid waste to thousands upon thousands of innocent people in those territories in the name of ending terrorism globally. And it's like, listen, I understand the reasoning behind Palestinian protests. Just from a principle standpoint, I get it. But the reality is, Israel is doing what they have the freedom to do as a country, which is to do the exact same thing we did in our conflicts over the course of the last 25 years, in the name, I guess you can say it, in the name of eradicating terrorism. It sucks that innocent people have to be carry the burden of it. But at the end of the day, it's like Israel is doing exactly what we did for 25 years through the course of how many different innocent nations and innocent people that ended up dying because of the ban. Does that make it right?
No.
That's the thing. It's like I don't necessarily believe in war, but that being said, I also, the last time America dealt with it was when Osama bin Laden laid waste to 3,000 of our people, and our response was swift, was it not? And at the time, Americans had no problem going after Osama bin Laden because of the emotion of it. And I just assume that after October 7th, that the Israeli people felt the exact same way we did after the Twin Towers came down. So I try to look at it from everyone's perspective. Like, I don't try to take a narrow view when it comes to these things.
No, I mean, we've had it as well here in Ireland with the North and the troubles up there we had up there on Bloody Sunday and
and this is leading nicely on to the next subject, Dermot.
Yeah, well, I am. I just want to finish off something on the Israel, which I never really meant to go into, but it's sort of blended in, and this is why I'm enjoying this with you, Steve, because it's bringing something extra to the podcast this week. And it's getting an American view, which is what we want. We want people to have their own views on this podcast. It's all about being honest. It's all about being true to yourself and true to where you like. Look, I think very quickly, in my view, is the Israelis should take the blame as well, because their intelligence failed on October the 7th. And that's my view, that look, they're doing what they're doing. They're an independent... They're an independent country, should be able to defend themselves. That is correct. That is the rule of law.
Do you think their intelligence? Let me ask you a question real quick. Do you think their intelligence completely failed to recognize Hamas in general, or do they think that they actually knew where Hamas was, but they had no wherewithal that an attack was attack was imminent? Because these cats were plotting.
They were blindsided, I think.
I don't think we'll ever know the answer to that, to be fair.
Correct,
I don't think they're not going to say. I mean, when I will say, when the man came on the telly the other week about the medical people that were sadly lost their lives, and it all came out, and this reporter asked a very genuine, serious question. Like a question he asked: were you 100% sure these were Hamas? Were you 100% sure you were attacking the right people? Were you 100? Was there any part of you said we cannot take? And his response, I rang Philip up, and I've never swore at TV more than I swore that day, where he was just dismissing the question, dismissing everything, and just going along the same narrative. But in saying that, I think what you've brought to the table in this, Steve, is a very, as I said again, a very balanced view in it. And I want to say thank you for that. Thank you for a very balanced view. And I'm sure you would agree with me, Philip.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it is great to get a sort of third-party view on it, because, we've got the European slant on it. You've got the American slant on it. And not 100 miles apart now, to be honest with you, I don't think.
I do want to say this, though, because I only can speak from an American point of view, and I know American journalism, right? They're not bipartisan. They're not even partisan. They have an agenda in which the direction of which they lead. They have narratives that they follow in order to get clicks and to get likes and to get followers, that type of thing. And so you have to understand that, number one, our media is very slanted, hardcore left. And the narrative is from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. So journalists follow these certain narratives because this is exactly the reader that they're catering to. And so when it comes to questions, when it comes to certain leaders, it's always going to be toward the poor Palestinian that is being caught up in this conflict into the river, from the river to the sea. It's not from also asking questions from a different angle, from a pro-Israel angle. It's Israel bad, Trump bad, Palestinian good. Everyone should love everyone, and it's like, that's the thing, is when it comes to certain reporters and the question they have, it's always important to remember that there is going to be a bias one way, and so and that's where these questions are coming from.
Yeah. Just a quick question on you, Steve. With you living in America, with the tariffs, and where the tariffs come out, they had the big sheet. I don't take this one, but I did have a giggle when he brought out the big sheet. I thought I was back at school when he brought out the big sheet. Look, Donald Trump is a character. He really is a character.
That's certainly true.
He is one of a kind. You had Joe Biden, who is very professional, very not as open as Donald Trump is.
Well, he also had dementia too, so it didn't help.
Yeah. That's a good.
He sadly had lost the faculties of his mind.
The funny part was, he asked somebody, I think, I don't know if you saw it, Philip, he was being asked the question, Joe Biden, he came out with the answer was, do you like the ice cream I've just had? I mean, I'm thinking, jeepers, okay, fair enough. Right, tariffs. Now, we've been here in Ireland, we're scared we're going to lose our pharmaceuticals because it's the biggest part of our economy over here in Ireland. As Philip, you well know. I'll start with Philip and I'll go to you on this, Steve. Philip, how major is the pharmaceuticals for the Irish economy, firstly, in this country?
It's worth something like 80 billion to us a year, I think. But a lot of it is American companies that are based over here for whatever reason, exporting the stuff back to the States. Now, it's important. It's like, I mean, it's not going to be the end of the world if the tariffs are imposed. But I get the feeling that the tariff situation is going to improve over the next couple of weeks, because it looks to me as if China has won the battle there from that angle anyway. And I think it took the CEOs of Walmart and various other big companies to sit Donald Trump down last week and say, listen, Donald, you keep up these tariffs, our shelves are going to be empty. And that may have already started to happen with you, Steve. I don't know if it has or not.
Not really, because we have American industries that are going to pick up to fill the void, and that's the whole point of the tariffs.
Yeah,
we don't want to be dependent on foreign. We don't want to be dependent on foreign goods, especially when we have the labor force here in order to sustain it. But also, I guess you can say under true capitalism, when you actually have multiple competing interests in an industry, it's going to lower the prices for consumers to begin with, anyways. And so that is the nexus and the plan behind these tariffs, where if you're going to buy foreign goods, there is going to be a price to pay, and of course the country makes money off of it, but it also fills the void for local American investment to pick up the slack where the void is. And we have plenty of entrepreneurs over here that are willing to step in to certain industry to fill a void.
It doesn't happen overnight. It can take 4 or 5 years.
True.
What's going to happen in the meantime? What's going to happen in the meantime when the void is not fillable by the tariffs of goods coming in, putting 40% or 50% on the price of goods?
You're gonna have to pay the price for foreign goods, unfortunately. But let's not pretend that other countries don't do the exact same thing. China has had tariffs on our goods forever. Japan has tariffs on our goods as well too, and yet they still buy it. But that being said, their industry fills voids, which is why their unemployment is laughably low, because they create their own goods. I would probably assume that Ireland has tariffs on foreign goods and certain foreign goods. and it's a way for the country to make a profit off importing foreign goods while making sure that Irish industries are flourishing.
Yeah,
I would assume.
I've never been a fan of tariffs. The tariffs are just an extra way, and they're an extra tax. And our tariff regime will be very small, if any, 10% maximum, maybe, which can be absorbed. Yeah. But 145%. I mean, you're talking that's Looney Tune stuff, really.
Yeah, that is like I would be fine with tariffs hovering right around 25%, somewhere around there. 140%. If you're saying 104%, you're trying to send a message to the country in which you're doing it. That you're not going to supply our market with cheap goods and undercutting American workers. I think 140% initially would be a message. But that being said, you would ultimately think that number would get down around like 20-25%.
I think the world's leading economists, really, the guys that people should be listening to, really, who know what they're talking about, are nearly all, not all, but nearly all in unison and saying tariffs are not a good thing at the moment in time. I think I've got to agree with them.
Well,
but it's with no offense to Donald Trump, right? Him coming in claiming to be the know-all, be-all, and know-all. The guy's been bankrupt 6 times. What does that say to you? He's not the genius that people say he is. Whereas other people that have spent their life studying the tariff and other economic aspects have come out with an opinion that's totally ad hoc, totally at variance with what Trump is saying. Who's right?
Well, I will say this, and there's a lot of not Trump haters out there, but I will say that he's been consistently saying this since like the early 1980s, that American lifestyle cannot be bankrolled on a credit card, and the way that America does business by essentially purchasing goods via I guess you can say credit. That would be the only way to describe it. Has to come to an end because it's crippled American industry. That being said, though, the United States lived off of tariffs for this first 150 years of existence. Now you can say, well, it was a different time. Of course, it was a different time, and the country needed money, and that was certainly one way of doing it. But tariffs were a U.S. staple for nearly 200 years of its existence, and it was working quite well when it came to imported goods. But that being said, things change after the Great Depression here, and things certainly changed after World War II. But that being said, it depends, right? It depends on what country that you do the most business with, and if whether or not they're taking advantage of you with absolutely not having tariffs, being able to flood a market, reaping all the profits, and not only are you left not making money out of the deal, but your American citizens are potentially losing jobs because it's cheaper to produce those goods that are flooding our market overseas. Right. So it's kind of like a damned if you do, damned if you don't thing. And by no means, I'm not an economist, but from a common sense standpoint, I would assume that at a right percentage, tariffs do make sense because you're going to, in the long run, and I agree with you, Philip, that it does take time, but you're eventually going to have entrepreneurs and American businessmen eventually fill in the void to create that competition within our market that will not only lower the prices of certain goods, but it also will create numerous jobs that are going to be able to pay Americans well.
Yeah. Just before we get on to our last subject, of course, is the main talking of the show, the border poll, when we have United Ireland. I just wanted to give you guys sort of a little thing before we end this segment about tariffs and that on certain markets. Now, if you look at certain markets, the US dollar is up against the British pound. The euro is up against the pound. If you look at the Dow Jones that finished yesterday, it finished 0.05% up on the day before. If you look on the NASDAQ, is it NASDAQ?
NASDAQ, the NASDAQ,
yeah, finished up 1.26% up on the day before, and also the FTSE 100 in London finished 0.09% up. So maybe the tariffs, maybe the markets are balancing out now to what they were. Maybe the markets are now adjusting to the tariffs, but it's another subject we'll love to get into you, Steve, as well, because I think you bring great insight into that as well. So thank you.
Yeah,
now
but by no means that I'm an economist, but I do respect Philip's opinion here, because I've heard the exact same thing. Global economists who are saying right now is probably not the greatest time for tariffs. But that being said, that is the mandate from the Trump administration. So.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk about administrations because we do have, it was Easter weekend, so happy Easter to everyone. I hope everyone filled themselves with chocolate. We all did. But also, it was a special time in Ireland because, Philip, what was it, the 106th year, 107th year of the Easter Rising?
Rising, yeah, Easter Sunday, 1916.
No, it actually happened on the Monday, not a Sunday, by the way, the Easter Rising.
Yeah, it was meant to happen.
A lot of people don't know that.
It was meant to happen on the Sunday. It was like everything else in Ireland, it was late.
It was due to happen on the Sunday. They got pissed up Sunday night. They said, hang on, lads, we'll do it on the Sunday. We'll do it on the Monday because we're too pissed on the Saturday to do it. But anyway, Ireland's been divided since 1921. We've had Northern Ireland and we've had the Republic of Ireland. We've had 30 years of troubles, Philip, between the Republican side of it, and it's brought all sorts of hassle, hasn't it, over the years.
Yeah.
Now, to give people a sort of, before we get into the subject of when will United Ireland, I think it's worth going over the history of where we are and how we got here. So, if you could bear me 5 minutes, I've put together a PDF of all different periods of Irish history to give you all an understanding why we're here and why it happened. So here we've got Philip, do you want to discuss these bits as hello, he's buggered off. He's gone for his own Easter Rising.
I'm gone. Right. Who are these books? Right. Okay.
Right.
These are the seven signatories to the Declaration of Independence, which was read out by Pádraig Pearse, the guy on the right there on the top line, outside the GPO on Monday, Easter Monday. It should be said at the time that the local Dublin population had no time for these guys.
No.
Because it was in the middle of the Second World War. The Battle of the Somme was about to happen in 2 or 3 months after this, in July 16. And a lot of Irish families had guys fighting for Britain in the First World War. So, in fact, whenever the garrison eventually surrendered in the GPO, there was guys they were throwing things at them when they were being brought away to prison. It really did not go down well. And the only thing, and it was probably the greatest own goal the British government ever did in the history of the British government, was they executed most of those guys in that picture. And that swayed public opinion totally against England.
I mean, they shot
those guys, went to prison for a few years. God knows what would have happened. There may not have been a rising, a continuation of the rising.
Just want to go through this. Thomas Clark was a tobacconist who joined the Irish Republican of Brotherhood in America, came back to Ireland, run a tobacconist. James Connolly was the godfather of the trade unionists in this country. He was an Irish. So you had James Connolly, you had Pádraig Pearse, who ran a Catholic school outside Dublin. Right, Joseph Plunkett as well was a poet. And also had he was not well as well, wasn't he, Philip, as well? Joseph Plunkett. He had
Thomas Clark wasn't too good either, I don't think.
No, what did Joseph Plunkett have? He had breathing problems. It's basically like COPD.
Septicemia or some of those.
Yeah. And then you had Eamon Kemet, who was a British establishment, very big in the UK, come over. So they were the 6 people who signed the Irish Declaration of Independence. A bit like George Washington, I think, for you, Steve, signing the American independence. Now, if you look at the
that wasn't George Washington. That was Thomas Jefferson and John Hancock and all those guys.
Sorry, I apologize. I apologize. Got that wrong. So, Philip, this is the public. What's it called? Sorry, I can never get the name right of it.
What's that? The Declaration of Independence.
Yeah. Now, if you look at this, there's similarities between this and the American one that was written. There's bits and pieces, mostly the same. Now, it's the most recognizable document in Irish history. Now, I'm not going to read it all out to you. I'm not going to stand up and start parading for Irish independence because we've got independence. But it was basically, this was what was read out by Patrick Pearse outside the GPO in 1916. Now, shoot forward to 1918, the War of the Easter Risings ended, and all the prisoners have been sent back home from England after their imprisonment. And there was a 1918 general election. Now, Sinn Féin won the majority of the seats in Ireland. And this was the last time Ireland voted as a whole country before partition. This was the last election Ireland voted as one before the partition in 1921. Philip, you got Sinn Féin, you got the Irish Unionists, and you got the Irish Parliamentary Party, which was sort of like Sinn Féin before Sinn Féin became Rising. Now, Philip, you have people like Michael Collins winning in West Cork. You got Arthur Griffiths, you got Dev, the traitor, winning in his, I think Leitrim he won in, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
He won in your neck of the woods. So as you can see, guys, we're getting there. We are getting there. 73. So Sinn Féin won the election. Now, they all met here. So what happened was, after election, I'm sure it's the same in America, you go to your national parliament or your houses of representative or whatever. And they're all supposed to go over to the houses of parliament. Well, Sinn Féin said, nah, we ain't doing that, bruv. No, bruv, we ain't doing that. We ain't crossing the Irish Sea. We're setting up our own parliament here. Bruv, yeah, that's what we're doing, bruv. We're setting up our own parliament here. Yeah, you can imagine Dev saying that to Winston Churchill, oh, Lord George, hey, brother, ain't coming over, right? We're setting up here, right? So this is the Mansion House where the first Dáil met in 1919. Am I right in that, Philip? Is it 1919?
1919, yeah.
1919. See, I do know my Irish history. And this man here is called Carl Brewer. Now, he was part of the 1916 Rising, but he became the first camp caller, the first speaker, well, we call it camp caller over here, and the first president of the Dáil. But on the same day, Philip, and only in Ireland this could happen. Irishmen can multitask. Somewhere down in Kerry, was it Kerry?
I'd say more likely Cork, but Cork or Kerry, but down that direction.
Well, anyway, if you're watching, Kevin, we're covering both of your counties because we're still not convinced where you live, by the way, if you're a Kerry man or a Cork man, so maybe let us know. The IRA, which was formed under Michael Collins, by the way, did their first hit. So they did it on the first day of the first meeting of the first Dáil, which then sparked the start of the Irish War of Independence. Now, what I want to ask you and Steve as well on this, both countries have had War of Independence. America, you had yours against the British. We had ours against the British. So already we've got something in common. Ireland and America are linked in so many ways down the centuries, intertwined through our histories. Philip, how important was the start of the War of Independence on the same day as the meeting of the first Dáil? What message did that send to Lord George, at that time British Prime Minister, do you think? And do you think, and by the way, why Michael Collins was not at the Dáil, this is a sub-story to it. He was actually in England, where was rescuing Dev. I refuse to call him by his first name because he's a traitor. I will explain why later. Out of a prison. Now, if you ever watched the film Michael Collins, it does show it in there.
Yeah.
But that breakout actually happened, didn't it?
It did, yeah. It did. But like, I think what your first question there is, what message did it send to England?
Yeah.
what we've been talking about in football terms for years, you'll never beat the Irish.
Yeah.
I think what happened really was, I mean, it's you mentioned the similarities with America. We had what's called the Anglo-Irish War, also known as the Irish War of Independence, closely followed by the Civil War. So in America, you had the same, only yours were about 100 years or 70 or 80 years apart. We had ours one after the other. We got them all out of the way together. But we'll come on to that now in a minute. But this was fairly nasty. Michael Collins more or less invented guerrilla warfare.
My cousin.
He could make a weapon out of anything. I don't know if you've seen the film Michael Collins, Steve, but it's Liam plays.
I will definitely watch it.
You should. It's brilliant. But there's one scene in it when he's got this guy. He's got a load of guys there, and he says, "Right, this is a weapon." And he had a lump of turf, which is what we use to burn in fires here, right? And the boy says, "How come that's a weapon?" He dipped it into a can of petrol, set light to it, and went and set fire to the thatched roof of the police station. Now that's a weapon, he says. He was brilliant. And he'd also, when he sent guys out on now, only use one bullet. Don't be riddling anybody. One bullet will do. You know? He was ruthless, efficient, and if he'd lived, God knows where we'd be today. We'd probably be a much better country now, to be honest.
Now, to put this into perspective for you, Steve, I would say George Washington is your national first president. Now, Michael Collins should have been our first Taoiseach. Well, he was. He was the president of the Free State, which we will get on to. But Mick Collins was the Minister of Finance at the time, and he raised, and this is true, how the hell he did it. He raised £500,000 in shares in under a year, back to raise funds for the Irish government, which wasn't legit, by the way. I mean, Ireland, we always take time, don't we, Philip, to get things legit in this country.
Bear in mind, Ireland was a very poor country at this stage. £500,000 quid was an incredible achievement.
And there was a fella sent over by the British to find out where the money was going. And he made a decision. And I would recommend there's a documentary on YouTube, on RT, called Ireland's Greatest Heroes. And they do this on Michael Collins, right? And he had, didn't he, Philip? He had to make an executive decision. Do I gun down this man, or what do I do? And he gunned him down, didn't he? And that stopped there. So, Steve, from an American point of view, how important has Ireland been to America? Like our history's been linked in so many ways down through the centuries, back to the famine of people traveling from Ireland to America. We've always been linked, haven't we, one way or the other? And do Irish Americans still look at Irish history and be proud of it in America, which they should be?
I would hope so. That would be ideal, considering that their forefathers made that trek to seek out a better life in the United States from one that was happening. I'm not 100% up to speed on Irish history. I am well aware of Irish independence because it certainly matches the American independence from what was happening here in the original 13 colonies. I think a lot of people forget that King George ruled the colonies with an iron fist. As a matter of fact, it got to the point where original colonists that had settled, whether it be in Massachusetts or whether it be in Virginia, one of the biggest ways that you can get ahead was being a landowner. But there came a decree that King George said none of the colonists were able to own land that would remain in the sovereignty of England. And everybody the colonies were being taxed a heavy price. People forget that George Washington himself was a commander in the British Army during the French and Indian Wars. He was a loyal British officer who actually had his loyalties tied to the British Kingdom. But that being said, he was also a very wealthy landowner. And when his business was undercut, you go from being somewhat of a very rich dude to wondering whether or not you're going to be able to pay off your debts because the taxation was just so exorbitantly high. And when that happens, you create enemies, right? And that's what ended up happening. Guys like John Adams, who John Adams was a lawyer in Massachusetts. and he defended, he defended British soldiers. We actually, what's funny is, I think you'll get onto is, the Bloody Sunday. We had the Boston Massacre during that time, where British soldiers just opened up fire on innocent people, and John Adams was the guy that coincidentally ended up representing some of those guys that opened fire. But that being said, it's it became an untenable situation, to the point where the colonizers that were living in the original 13 colonies just decided, listen, man, you cannot tax us at this rate without having some sort of representation in the British Parliament. And of course, that was a non-starter, because they weren't considered British citizens.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, with the rest is history in the United, and we got together and decided that it would be best for a revolution. A war ensued, and even loyal British soldiers have their breaking point. And George Washington led the
revolution
side of things. Yeah.
Now here, Philip, we've got a picture of the members of the First Oil outside the Mansion House in 10th of April 1919.
Yeah.
Of course, there's some famous people there. Of course, I'm related to Michael Collins way down my family tree, which I'm very proud of, as I keep telling Philip. Yeah. I don't think I've mentioned it to you before, have I, Philip? No.
No, not only about 93 and a half times. No.
Yeah.
Make it 94.
Right. Yeah, 94,000. Philip, there's many other people there. You got O'Neill there, whose grandson actually led the PDs, didn't he, for a while as well?
Yeah.
What's his name?
Was he Daniel Levy's father in there as well?
Yeah, Daniel Levy's great grandfather. But anyway, we've got Michael Collins there. We've got Cathal Brugha. We've got Arthur Griffiths. The president was the founder of Sinn Féin.
Harry Bolton is there as well.
Yeah, we've got Dev, who I will get onto in a minute. We've got O'Neill, the man who put out in the newspaper the day before the Easter Rising for his lot not to stand up for the Easter Rising, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'm back in 1 sec.
Yeah. You got W.T. Cosgrave, who took over from Michael Collins as the president of the Free State before we become Ireland, then before we become a republic. So there's a lot of people there. No women, by the way, but there was women brought in to that. Then on the 3rd of May, 1921, the Government of Ireland Act of 1920, the partition of Ireland was established. The current shape of Ireland, of the border running through Ireland, came on the 7th of December 1922, when Northern Ireland opted out of the Free State. Now, the Free State was the end of nearly 2 years of talks between us and the British government to end the war of the Irish War of Independence. Now, these are the signatories on that document, which I will bring up in a minute. We've got Arthur Griffiths, Michael Collins, Robert Barton, Eamon Duggan, and George Duffy. They were the signatories that signed the treaty. Now, Michael Collins famously said when Lord Birkenhead signed his name, he said, "I have signed my political death warrant." Michael Collins, in response to that, it says, "I have just," what did he say? His
own physical death warrant.
Basically. Yeah, I have now signed my personal death warrant, which he was killed. So they were the signatories. That is actually the signatories of the document, which took some finding, believe me, and a good copy as well. So, Philip, do you want to read through the Irish side of it?
I can't really make out a lot of the name, but Michael Collins is actually the third one down. See the Micheál O'Colleen. Then there's Rich.
There you go. If I do that, there you go for you. Dead signatories there.
But I think as an aside to all that, whenever the actual treaty was passed, eventually, I'm probably jumping ahead here a bit, Dermot, but there was a vote in the Dáil. That's the result of the vote in the Dáil that passed the treaty. Whenever the day came for the British to hand over to the control to Michael Collins, It was due to happen, say, at 1 o'clock in the afternoon at the Mansion House at Dublin Castle. And Michael Collins turned up at 1:45. And the Lord Chief, whatever you call him, with the big hat on, there was the English Viceroy, said, "Mr. Collins, you're 45 minutes late." And Michael Collins, well, he says, "You've kept us waiting 700 years for this, so I think 45 minutes is a small price to pay."
Yeah.
But in the film, they changed it in the film, didn't they?
I did,
And in the film, they said, "Mr. Collins, you're 7 minutes late." Well, you kept us waiting 700 years. You can have your 7 minutes. So that is good. I mean, it was then passed by the people of Ireland, then, wasn't it, Philip? It went to a general election, and the people of Ireland did vote.
It went to a referendum, basically.
It went to a referendum, and that's how we work in this country. Anything that we pass in this country is voted by the people. Yeah. Now, if you like the Maastricht Treaty or the couple of treaties under Bertie Ahern that you didn't get through the first time, you wait 6 months, put it through again, and just make sure, and you keep going. Yeah. So it's, but normally, isn't it, Philip? Normally we do things right. Then came the Civil War. Now, I've said it to you, haven't I, Philip? This is the most pointless war of any wars that happened. So the background to it, Philip, I do for a bit and do for it. Do you want to just tell people the background of why it started?
What happened was, whenever the referendum came in to accept the vote, Eamon de Valera and what became the Fianna Fáil's faction openly defied it. Now, Eamon de Valera was in Dublin the time the treaty was organised in London, because he was cute enough. He knew that England was never going to give up the entire island of Ireland. He knew that the best that would happen was we would get back 26 counties and they would hold on to 6. And he knew that if he was a signatory to that particular document, it'd be like Michael Collins. It would have been signing his own death warrant. So De Valera was cute. He waited in the long grass until the treaty was passed. Then he objected. And he took all the Fianna Fáil TDs out of Parliament, including Harry Boland, who had been Michael Collins' sidekick all along. The two of them were like Mutt and Jeff. They really were. Then they fell apart because of this. And this particular Civil War, I know the American Civil War was particularly nasty, Steve, but that was more or less North versus South. This was a case of, you could have a family with 4 brothers in the family. 2 of them were anti-treaty and 2 of them were pro-treaty. It tore families apart. And there is still animosity, would you believe, 120 years later, whenever it is, 100 years later, there was still animosity for people that would have gone one side or other on this because of this particular treaty back 100 years ago. And it was horrible. And I mean, some of the cruelty and some of the killings here were just, and the assassinations were just off the scale, including one where the guy that organised, had been head of the British Army in England or in Ireland during the occupation, Sir Henry Wilson, was assassinated in front of his house in London on the orders of Michael Collins. You know, and that didn't help. Yeah. But, I mean, in fact, I would imagine they were about to send back. They were going to send back the army when that happened. But anyway, the Civil War kept going for maybe 10 months, 11 months. Eventually, Michael Collins' side won purely because they were getting the backing. They were getting arms from Britain to do to win the war. But as soon as the war was over, Michael Collins assassinated.
No, he was assassinated before the end of the Civil War.
Just before the end of it. Just literally before the end of it.
Well,
that's
so. And it was a clash between pro and anti-treaty. Is that why the North broke off to form their own independent nation?
No.
Well, no. The North was part of the Irish treaty that was signed that we would get 26. Yeah, we would get the 26 states, but the North would be later on. They would discuss the North later on. And they never did discuss it because it was pushed through in the back door that Lloyd George, which at the time Northern Ireland was being run by Carson, who was a loyalist, a unionist at the time. The unionists did outrank the Catholics up the north, so they wanted to stay within the British Empire or the UK at the time, and that's how that came about. Hence, We'll go forward, Philip, possibly 30 years, 20 years or 30 years to the 60s. You had at the time a lot of civil rights by the Catholics, because at the time Catholics up the north weren't being treated right. It's a little bit like the what was going on in America at the same time as well, or the Martin Luther King. So that sort of thing, similarities again between the two countries. Again, minority people that weren't being allowed to get jobs. If you went to a job and you were a Catholic and there was a Protestant come in there, a Protestant would get that job. Do you know what I mean?
Even though the Catholic might have been very much more highly qualified, the religion
there was times where Catholics couldn't go into certain pubs, couldn't go into certain areas because they were Catholics. So John Hume and people like that started up the civil rights movement over there. It got to a point where Jack Lynch, where there was, I mean, you would explain this more than I know Steve's only got 10 or 15 minutes, but Philip, very quickly, just for Steve's benefit, Jack Lynch and then the broadcast he did on RTE, everyone thought he was going to send the Irish Army into the north.
Mm-hmm.
You were living where, in Ireland or Birmingham at that time in 60?
I was at that stage. I was in England.
Right.
But
so what was your view from it at that time, Philip? I mean, do you think Jack Lynch missed the trick? Or do you think he did the right thing?
I think he did the right thing by not going in, because the loyalist percentage of the power vacuum in the north, or the power in the north, was held by the loyalists. There was not enough Catholics, not enough. There wouldn't have been enough arms. The British Army would have come in straight on top of the whole thing and caused a bloodbath. If somebody invaded their country, they would come back and they would retaliate, as they've done frequently places. So no, he did the right thing. But the problem was then it then sparked off what's now known as the Troubles, which lasted until 1998. Really, with 3,000 people were killed and thousands more maimed and families ruined and everything because of it, you know. And then that kind of moves on to what's going on at the moment. There's now a call for a border review, that the 6 counties would join the 26. And while it's been mooted a number of times over the years, it's never actually happened. And to be honest with you, I still think it's a bit early. I don't think it would pass. It certainly wouldn't pass in the north. It'll pass down here. But I can see a situation, if there was a border poll and it was passed overall, it's 32 counties, that the 6 counties would become part of the Republic of Ireland. I can see a rerun of the Civil War again, because the boys in the north would not take it.
Steve, from an American point of view, after all what we've quickly gone through Irish history and why it came about, and we could do another show in it, really. I mean, I'll give my views at the end, what I think. My father-in-law said something to me the other day, which I think is a very important point, but I'll make that after you, Steve, because I know you're short on time. What's your overall view on the border in Ireland? And do you think Ireland should be united? And will you see it in your lifetime? If you could sort of sum that up into one sort of summary sort of thing.
You know what, to be honest with you, the only thing I know about the tension between the North and the mainland Ireland is, you know, what was summed up in a U2 song, Sunday Bloody Sunday. So I'm aware of it. But as far as that goes, I'm really not knowledgeable on the subject. But I will say that it had 2 sides have to want it, correct? The North, you know, the North has to want to be united. And from what I know, that, you know, what's interesting about it is, like, years ago, I actually befriended a fellow who originally came from Northern Ireland, and the disdain that Northerners have for Southerners, that was something that was kind of passed down. It's like your football club that gets passed down from your grandfather to your father to your son, and then the son has kids and it gets passed down. And again, I don't like, I hate to say this, but I'm not necessarily well versed, but I got the impression that you know, the North is perfectly fine being independent from mainland Ireland. But that being said, I would just assume that both parties would have to want it to be a united Ireland. Now, is there enough want from the southern counties of Ireland to want to do that? Is there enough want from the northern counties to want to be able to do that? I haven't.
It's certainly moving. 20 years ago, there wouldn't have been a talk of this because the Protestants in the North held sway. It's moved now. Sinn Féin are the first are leading the government in the North for the first time ever. So there is a movement to move to the vote will be very close in the North, but I honestly don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen.
I don't. Well, my question to you guys is I beg your pardon. Will this financially help citizens of Northern Ireland to be a part of, to be a united Ireland? Is the Irish government is the Irish government going to make sure that the well-beings of the North are going to be treated the same as the well-beings of the South? Is there enough resources? Is there enough resources for jobs? What does religion play a role in this? Is there going to be freedom of religion to pick and choose exactly how any individual chooses to live their life? There's a lot of things that kind of go into this, but that being said, I'll just take the lead from Philip here, who obviously knows way more about it than I do. But if 20 years ago it was a non-starter, what would be the one thing that would actually be a starter? What would be the one thing that the Northern Irish would benefit from, which would make this a solid yes?
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I think there could be a shortfall in resources at this side of the border to take on the North. We're finding it hard enough to cater for our hospital. Our health service at the moment is in chaos. Mind you, it's in chaos in the North as well. So we'll be well matched up there. But I don't think the economic climate is going to be strong enough for us to take on the North. Again, I'm saying that Dermot, I'd love if we did it, but being purely on a hard, cold facts, I think we're not right financially to do it.
Would you not think the EU would come in with financial support?
No. The fact we're taking over a country that's not in the EU, they may tell us to take a hike.
Oh, is Northern Ireland not in the EU?
No. Part of the UK. It's not in the
part
EU.
of the UK. So, I mean, my father-in-law said that we were talking about it the other day, and my father-in-law said that to me. In time, the North may evolve into Ireland, and we may become. Because they made.
Just to give a bit of lesson, I worked on the border. I worked in a town that was literally you could put your feet on both sides of the border, and that was a scary place to be in the mid-90s. And thank God that's gone now. But there was still enough resentment and still enough hostility and mistrust between the North and South to mean I don't think it's going to happen yet.
Now, to put another swing on it, Philip, over Easter, a statement come out from a new faction of the IRA saying we're still around, we're still here, we're still keeping an eye on things. I in our lifetime, Philip, we've seen everything from the Troubles to the Good Friday Agreement to what it is now.
Yeah.
You've seen a lot of changes, Philip, in all your lifetime during Ireland. I've seen a lot in my nearly 50 years of being alive in Ireland.
I was nearly blown up. I was nearly blown up in Belfast.
Yeah, listen to this, Steve. This is true story. Philip told me this once before you go. I know you got to go, man, but listen to this story. Like, it is unreal.
I had just joined the bank. I was working bank for years. I was up doing my training course in Belfast, and I was out for a walk at lunchtime. This was in the mid-70s, and next thing, I was rugby tackled, or American football tackled, the way you want to look at it, into a doorway by a British soldier. And I thought, Christ, what's going on here? The next thing, about 3 seconds later, the Europa Hotel, which is the most bombed hotel in the world prior to Beirut coming on the scene, went up again, was blown up again, and all the shop windows were all smashed. Now, if the man hadn't thrown me into the window, I would have at least been badly cut with flying glass and whatever. So that's,
And then the car, you driving past in Dublin.
I was driving past 2 years later, but a year later, I was driving through Dublin. I had my first car, very proud of it. And I heard a bang. And there was a lot of demolition work going on at the time, so I thought nothing of it, you know. I had no radio in the car or anything at that stage, but eventually I landed down home to my frantic parents. Are you okay? Are you okay? I said, yeah, what's going on? 3 bombs were after going off in Dublin. And we passed the scene of one of them 30 seconds before it went off. So, you know, that's why I've got first-hand experience of this.
Boy.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
They tried and they couldn't get rid of you, Philip. They tried. They tried. Steve, I know you have to go, sir. Listen, thank you for joining us. I've really enjoyed having you. I know from Philip as well.
Yeah. Steve, I really enjoyed the insight there. Absolutely brilliant. Well done, man.
It
so
was,
you're welcome.
It was a pleasure to meet you, Philip. And hopefully we can do this again. But yeah, you know, what's interesting is there are certain subjects that I'm completely ignorant on, and I actually love listening to the history because there's a lot of things about Ireland that piqued my interest. But that being said, not really well versed in Irish history, so it was awesome to listen to this history lesson because I think you're right, Dermot. There's a lot of parallels between the U.S. And how it got its start and Irish independence. So I do appreciate that.
Yeah.
No problem. Well, listen, Steve.
Okay.
Where can people find you very quickly? Before you go,
everywhere. I'm everywhere. I'm on YouTube at Stateside Footy, and of course, if you follow Dermatron on the TWHC TWD channel, you'll find Stateside Footy, and of course, there's that. And you can also catch me on Twitter at Stateside Footy as well too. Mainly, it's all about American soccer and Tottenham Hotspur. But that being said, now that now it's also Irish history as well too, so that's pretty rad. I like it.
Yeah, well, you're more welcome to join us anytime on the Political Rant. That's what it is. You're on tonight at 9:30, guys. So do get over to Stateside Footy and do get over there. Hit the like button, hit subscription. It's New York Red Bulls versus Montreal. Do you know what? I might join you for that later. I might.
That would be awesome too. You're seeing the reigning Eastern Conference champions and the New York Red Bulls take on last place Montreal, but Montreal's a young team, kind of scrappy. So I'm looking forward to that. It would be awesome if you join me. But we also have tomorrow. We also have the pre-match build-up for Tottenham versus Liverpool, which will be a bloodbath. But that's a story for a different time.
And Philip, I'm now found the American Tottenham. We have found them. The Seattle. So listen, Steve, I'll let you go. I've got one more point to make to Philip before then we will finish up here. But thank you for coming on. God bless you, Steve.
Yep. Enjoy, Philip. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday, and I hope you have a good weekend, my guy.
Thank you, man.
See you later, Steve. Right, Mr. Brady. Finish off very quickly. And I want you to pick your most funniest political point of the week. This is your point to really poke fun at anyone political you want.
Let me see now.
Without you can't pick Donald Trump because you've already picked him already. So you have to pick somebody else.
Oh my God. Yeah, I think I'll pick Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Okay.
She'll probably put her foot in it more than she usually does, which is saying something. When the Pope died, she came out, God has a way of rooting out the evil. Oh, imagine saying that the day the Pope dies.
Well, I have to say the funniest thing I saw this week, Philip, and I am going to. Why I said you not to pick Donald Trump because I wanted to use it because I knew you use it, right? I'm looking forward to going.
And he wears the blue suit when he goes there, you know.
Yeah.
As if he was
I mean, no disrespect. Who looks forward to going to a funeral? To be fair. Unless it's an Irish one, where you know it's a big piss up at the end of it.
There's a lot of people that are going to his, that's for sure.
Yeah. I thought Steve made very balanced points today on some of the subjects we did. I enjoyed that. Philip, what's happening next week? I think you're still away. Are they back in the Doyle next week? Is politics back to normal next week?
They're back next week. Yeah. Back for another few hours.
What's your weekly political and antennae going to be looking at, Philip? What you think is we've got the election of the Pope, of course.
I'm going to start for the week or so.
Yeah. What we will do, once new Pope does get covered, we will cover that live, by the way. Me and Philip will cover that live. We've got the presidential election coming up, Philip, in November.
Yeah, and still nobody put their hand forward, apart from Conor McGregor. Nobody's really put their arm up to say.
Well, Bertie Ahern has now joined the membership of Fianna Fáil again. So I think he'll be running for
Yeah,
Fianna Fáil.
yeah.
I tell you, we are going to cover that live, the result of the presidential election, by the way. That should be interesting doing our results service that day. But Philip, thank you again. I've really enjoyed doing these shows. I actually do enjoy doing these political shows with you. I'm sorry we haven't done one in a while. There's just been no news about it, has there, Philip? Really?
Well, like, we've all been busy with football things and whatever, you know. And,
but next week, next Saturday, we're going to try to keep this on a Saturday, actually, because I think it's better on the Saturday, actually, than a Friday evening. We are going to talk about Gubu. I want to do this, Philip. I want to do Gubu next week.
We'll get there yet.
Now, for people that don't know what Gubu's about, right? Can you explain I know people know what it is, but it's Irish politics was. How would you describe Irish politics in a nutshell? In that between 1980 to 1984.
I'd say in a nutcase it'd be more like it. But
in a nutshell.
Actually, what happened was the word Gubu stands for grotesque, unbelievable, bizarre, and unprecedented. And it results from a series of strange incidents in 1982, which culminated in a double murder, a guy called Malcolm MacArthur being apprehended in the house of the then Attorney General, Patrick Connolly.
I'm not laughing at the murder. That's shocking, but I'm laughing that he was found in the Attorney General's
house. He skipped off to America. He was brought back. It was all. It's crazy, and it nearly brought down the government. You know, it was just.
Journalist phones being bugged.
Yeah.
Which can I just say that came out? That was the downfall of Charlie Hottie, but that didn't come out for another 10 or 12 years later, when the former Minister of Justice actually said on a tape. He was told by Hottie to tap the phones of the journalists. You then had your man that was running for president saying, "I did not phone the president up," which he did, and he denied that live in a television debate as well. A lot happened, didn't it, Philip? I mean, a lot happened then that bit Charlie Hottie in the ass 10 years later or 12 years later. It's just the man was. I don't know how you describe Charlie Hottie. A maverick?
Well, he's the one that invented the saying Gubu, so we'll have to give him some credit.
How would you describe Charlie Hottie in one word? To get people hooked.
Legally, or without slandering anybody, how will I describe him? Different.
Do you know what? I'm going to end on that. That is the most diplomatic answer, Mr. Brady, you've ever given me.
Yeah,
that bombshell.
I could say a lot more, but I won't.
Yeah, on that bombshell, we're going to leave it there, and I'm going to leave it on. I can't believe it. Mr. Brady's been diplomatic. We have to end that there. Thank you all so much for watching. Do click the hype button. Do come over and subscribe to the channel. And let us know in the comments, what do you want us to talk about? Do you want us to talk about the EU? Do you want Steve on again? Talk about the American side as well, politics. But whatever you do, hit the like button, hit the subscription button if you can. Philip, I shall talk to you a minute about another subject regarding Tottenham. Nothing to do with politics. Right. And, could do with something to do with politics, but that's another subject. And, we shall see you next week. Come on. I don't know how to end this show. Just end it, Philip being diplomatic, which I'm nearly fell off my chair. See you next week.
You can name it like the weather forecast. Now we'll have the weather forecast.
Yeah. Now we're going over to Mrs. Brady and Mrs. Trump for the weather forecast. See you later. Bye-bye.